Designing clothing and immersing myself into the affairs, lifestyle, and survival of the American textile industry was not our initial plan, but it has certainly become a passion of mine. 4 years ago, 2 friends and I devised a blog/news source, hoping it would provide a voyeuristic and often humorous avenue into the world of alpine sports. In discussions of promoting this idea, a clothing line was decided to be a really good partner for our branding. We wanted to make a really small but really high-quality line that would just fit right into our niche and kind of sidecar the blog idea. We also wanted something that was going to be a really fresh angle, and at the time, American-made seemed to be the perfect fit. Getting a logo or some ideas onto clothing can be very easy and very inexpensive. You can simply hop on sourcing websites like Alibaba.com, send off some emails with some ideas, go back and forth a little bit, and bam, you have clothes. Or you could just contact the local screen printer and kind of pick out some fabrics, styles, and cuts, and you would be done. Our initial step in the development of our first garments was to look into where fabric came from. Could we source anything close to Bozeman? This search led to our first very shocking realization. Unless we wanted to grow cotton or raise sheep for wool, Montana fabrics were nearly impossible to come by. Stepping back from Montana, we quickly realized that American milled fabrics were also nearly non-existent, and we were going to have to dig pretty hard. Actually, many of the higher-end performance fabrics that you see used in today have never really even been milled in the U.S. Despite these obvious challenges, we decided to stay with our commitment to being 100% American-made. There's a distinction I would like to make here, that many of the American-made clothing labels that you hear of often import their fabrics and or components for assembly in the U.S., or vice versa. They'll mill it here and have it assembled somewhere else and then return and sold into our market. This bait-and-switch tactic is wildly common. To us, American-made was American-made. We were kind of in shock about that. We wanted no ocean transit to be involved, and we wanted all the components to come from operations that were on American soil. While numbers do vary, and with a recent rebirth, they've shifted towards the positive, about 3% of the clothing sold in America is actually made in America. Of that percentage, about half is actually made with American components. For our 2012 line, we have milled, cut, sewn, or printed in Oregon, California, Texas, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Maine, Pennsylvania, and Montana. If we were transported back to the early 20th century, we could have had this whole process done in a single day's ride by horseback. After we had located what was left of American-milled fabrics and the companies that were producing 100% American-made clothing, we hit our second wall. Many of the mills that were left and the sewing contractors were very resistant to our ideas. We wanted everything done differently. We wanted different cuts, we wanted new fabrics, we wanted new styles, and everything was met with resistance. It took us about a little over 2 years to find a handful of devout, creative, and like-minded people who understood what we were even trying to do. We have had moments where we have stepped back and realized why clothing is made overseas. Contractors in other countries rarely question your ideas and will simply just return with a price, oftentimes whether they actually think they can make the garment or not. Our process in producing clothing is very different than what I described earlier of shooting off some emails and maybe sending some drawings and pictures around and getting a sample 3 weeks or a month later. Every step for Phar North has been an adventure, from locating the fabrics, often developing the fabrics, to collecting the components, to finalizing a sample. It's done step by step and garment by garment, every single one. American fabric milling and sewing have literally died in the last 20 years. What was once the pride of the Southeast is now the unemployed skill of the Southeast. Today, the U.S. garment industry consists of about 621,000 jobs. That's a decline of 56% since its high point in 1973. The movement of production overseas began to build in the late 70s and then just exploded into the 80s. Much of the cotton that is currently produced in the United States is exported to China and other countries where the material is milled, more times than not knitted over woven, cut, sewn, and then returned for sale. China has emerged as the largest exporter of fashion, accounting for 30% of the world apparel exports. Fabrics are about 20% cheaper overseas right now, but they can be much cheaper. However, if you negate the shipping across the ocean, customs, duties, and taxes, it can be a wash. Where the real savings is with imported garments is in the labor. The average monthly wage of a Chinese garment worker is between $150 and $250 US. The average monthly wage of an American garment worker is between $1,800 and $2,000. Because of this rush of cheap labor, clothing prices in America have declined about 10% since 1998 alone. There is a lot of hype right now surrounding American-made and sustainable products. In general, we don't buy it. We always try to take the time to step back and inject some logic into our use of these marketing buzzwords. And I'm not up here looking to preach to anyone about the dignity of a 100% American lifestyle. I'm wearing imported jeans and shoes. However, we do believe that eliminating the often multiple trips a finished garment makes across the Pacific Ocean from raw material to sale in the marketplace has obvious environmental benefits. And this serves as our main motivation and commitment to the protection of the environment. The regenerated fabrics and recycled and all the sustainable materials used, that's just simply icing on the cake to us, really. A single cargo ship emits 50 times more sulfur than a semi-truck per metric ton. And according to a 2010 Guardian piece, confidential data from a maritime industry insider shows that the world's 15 largest cargo ships may well be emitting as much pollution as the world's 760 million cars do. Exhaust emissions from ships account for almost up to 30% of the nitrogen oxide pollution and about 9% of the sulfur oxide pollution. According to a study conducted by the BBC, by the year 2010, almost 40% of air pollution over land could be coming from these ships. Our other motivation is the betterment of the individuals that are milling, cutting, and sewing Phar North clothing. This is where we find the term sustainability in context. This commitment to American-made trickles down socioeconomically to affect the local and the national economy. That, in return, fuels the engine that will help Phar North grow sales. Our profits are returned to a circle that is recycled nationally. The people that make our clothes are paid a fair wage, and the facilities that produce our materials are held to standards we're all comfortable with. While we take pride in being a rare American-made cut and sew label, we are ecstatic about the recent bloom of legit American-made clothing labels. New brands like American Giant and Brand of the Free are committed to making clothing in America for the mainstream. And labels like Schoolhouse Clothing and even Levi's have brought some or all their production and or sourcing back to the U.S. With labor costs increasing overseas and the threat of exploding fuel prices, we expect to see this trend continue. What started as a small idea has grown into a passion for all of us at Phar North. Looking back through our journey, ignorance has been our savior, though. Knowing what we do now, our ambition and pride could have easily been soured. But the rewards of watching our idea spread like brush fire, and sometimes feeling alone in the crowd, have solidified our commitment to 100% American-made. And I feel like every season we get a better scope on what American-made means. Not just to the people who help us produce our goods, but to those who buy it. We will never be able to sell $5 t-shirts or $10 hoodies, but we know that our fans and our loyal customers already expect much more from us. We have committed to making more than quality garments. We have committed to making quality garments as close to home as possible. We have committed to making, in the end, being American-made has become as big a part of our branding as the alpine sports that we designed for. Thank you.